What if I told you that the Muslim marriage crisis had nothing to do with the gender wars or men versus women, but everything to do with Muslim communities modernizing their expectations while abandoning Islamic ethics and adopting Christian moral frameworks? Hi, my name is Zainab. I am a divorce attorney, a person who was raised in the diaspora, an eldest daughter, and someone who got married at the age of 31. So I definitely feel like I have something to add to this conversation. And this is going to be part one of my Muslim marriage crisis series. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how divorce was pretty normal in pre-modern Muslim societies and why divorce became such a shameful and taboo topic in modern Muslim societies. Also, before I begin, I just need to make one thing very clear. I cannot cover every aspect of history in one 10-minute video, even if I'm doing a series. So if you go to my Substack after you've watched this video, I will have published a list of all sources I use in the video, and hopefully that can function also as a reading list for you guys as well. So, an Islamic marriage is called a nikah, which is a legal contract. And like any contract, it has stipulations, it has enforceable rights, and of course, it has exit clauses. And listen, while marriage is absolutely sacred and beloved by God, it was never actually meant to function like a Christian sacrament that could never be broken. And that's not really my opinion, that's actually historical fact. In medieval Islamic societies, divorces were actually frequent and the rate was quite high. And it didn't lead to social collapse. For example, in 15th century Cairo, 30% of marriages were ending in divorce and women frequently got remarried. And you may ask yourself, well, why? Why was that? And that's because marriage was understood as being a contractual relationship, and that divorce was considered a legal institution. Both men and women understood and knew how to act on their Islamic rights that were given to them. And divorces were actually often initiated by wives, which also flies in the face of a lot of people's assumption that only men can divorce women. That's not true. But the reasoning for a lot of these divorces were for reasons that honestly would sound incredibly familiar to us today. For example, women would divorce their husband because they failed to fulfill their legal obligation to them in a financial sense. So they would divorce them because their husbands didn't provide them with adequate clothing, food, or housing. Other reasons why a woman would divorce their husband was because they didn't get along. It was nothing to do with family enmity or clan enmity. It was just two people who were like, I'm sick of you, I'm out of this, John, right? So that was another common reason. And women would actually personally appear in court. They would personally negotiate their own divorces, and many of them didn't return to go back home and live with their parents. In fact, in many of these communities, there were homes for Muslim women that was female only, for divorcees, for single women, for widows, etc. And actually, in cases of abuse or mistreatment, courts would actually frequently intervene to protect the woman from their abuser. And as a divorce attorney, I wish that was still the case in today's modern court systems, because I'm going to be honest, the court system as it exists today in the West in the family court system, does not really protect women from their abusers. And in fact, a lot of the time, what I unfortunately have had to witness is abusers using the court system to further enact their abuse on their victims. Now, men also initiated divorce too, some for similar financial reasons, i.e. they couldn't, or their marriage itself had become too financially burdensome and they wanted out because they literally couldn't keep up with their demands of their wives. And one interesting historical tidbit that I came across was that some men would even swear oaths on pain of divorce. So they would be like, if I do X thing, then my wife is divorced. And it became such an issue that it actually led to a lot of unintended divorces. And this is actually something that Ibn Taymiyyah tried to reform in his time. But the key point I'm trying to make here is that divorce was common, and it was in fact negotiated, and it was done for morally intelligible reasons, and it was not considered a scandal. Now, how was this possible? That was because Islamic law operated in a decentralized and very juristic-led approach. And there were two aspects of Islamic governance. There was the policy of the rulers, and then there was the fiqh, which was the ethical jurisprudence. So in places like Egypt, India, North Africa, you would have Sharia courts and locally appointed judges. And Islamic law was seen as a living, breathing system that often, it wasn't just like one rule and it applied to everyone. It was open to interpretation and it was analyzed on a case-by-case basis. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, where did this all go? Why don't we have that anymore? And the response to that is very simple and pretty predictable, which is colonialism. Islamic law was never really designed to function as state law. Like I said, it was decentralized, it was jurist-driven, and it was embedded in everyday social life and norms. So it wasn't this like uniform legal code that was enforced from the top down. And I want to make one thing very clear. I'm not saying that colonialism replaced Islamic law with Christianity one-to-one. What it replaced Islamic law with was the modern nation state. So in places like British-ruled Egypt, British India, French North Africa, and post-Ottoman successor states like Turkey and Syria, Islamic law really stopped being this living, breathing tradition and got reduced to codified statutes that were kind of stripped of moral reasoning. And that's because under colonial rule, those local Sharia courts, those locally appointed judges were subordinated, and their right to mete out decisions was pretty much reduced. And at the same time, the moral assumptions that these nation states would treat as neutral, as the colonizers would treat as like, this is the accepted social norm, this is something that should apply to everyone, about, for example, the permanence of marriage or family stability. Those were actually inherited from Christian European social norms and not Islamic ethics. And that's because in Christian tradition, the marriage is considered a sacrament, and it was pretty much taboo to even seek a divorce. So divorce didn't become like shameful or anything because Islam itself changed its approach. It became shameful because marriage became a state project, and it was governed by these modern legal systems that equated stability with morality. Now, listen, I am not an advocate for easy divorce. I know some of you are watching this and you are absolutely going to come away from this video thinking that, which, I mean, I should probably explain myself more to the point then in that case, but whatever, you guys are free to think what you want to think. I know who I am, and that's not me. What I am arguing is that we have lost our Islamic understanding of how marriage law was meant to function, and that high divorce rates in Islamic history existed because people understood their rights and they were empowered to exercise them. And I have been on the internet for a very long time, especially the Muslim side of the internet. So all this talk about like demonizing Muslim women for seeking divorce or saying, oh, you don't need feminism, Islam gives you all your rights. Yeah, none of that is new. If anything, all that's changed is the increase in vitriol and the increase in general stupidity in people saying those things and repeating those things. The thing is, yes, Islam does give us our rights, but the system, in which we are able to exercise those rights has ceased to exist, and nobody is interested in that. So when people say, oh, we need to turn back to like traditionalism and conservatism, I kind of have to laugh because you're not really doing that. You are basically pivoting in a circle in the same colonial Western moralizing Christian framework that has been the thing that took away actual like traditional approaches to Islam. But hey, that's me. Next part in the series is going to be me talking about modern issues facing Muslims today in getting married. So stay tuned for that and ask me any questions below that you would like for me to answer. Thanks. Bye.